They told us it would be over by Christmas. That's what they always said. But standing there on that rattling boat, soaked in salt, vomit, and fear, Christmas felt like another world, another life. June 6, 1944. They called it D-Day. To us, it was just the day the ocean stopped being water and became something else. Something thick, heavy, choking. The color of ash and blood. I was 19. My name doesn't matter much anymore. Just another private from Kansas with a girl back home and a photograph in my pocket that I wouldn't live long enough to replace. They said we were part of something great. Operation Overlord. It sounded like the name of a monster. And maybe it was. The sea was full that morning, full of ships stretching far beyond what any eye could see. The gray sky sat low and heavy, like it didn't want to look at what we were about to do. There was no glory in that cold wind, only the stink of diesel, gun oil, and sweat. And behind all of it, the silence. Not peace, just the waiting kind of silence. The kind before an execution. The guy beside me, his name was Miller, I think, kept whispering Hail Marys under his breath, over and over like a broken record. Another guy, Sergeant Beals, had that dead stare in his eyes already. He was the one who told us not to get attached. "You talk to a guy too long," he said once. "You're just giving yourself something else to mourn." We were headed for Omaha Beach. They said it was just sand and bunkers. But they didn't tell us the beach had teeth. When the ramp dropped, everything went wrong. Bullets screamed before we even touched shore. It was like the air caught fire. You didn't hear single shots, just a wall of noise that ripped into flesh, wood, and soul. The first wave didn't stand a chance. Men dropped like bags of wet cement, some never even stepping off the boat. The ocean turned red so fast it made you wonder how much blood a sea could hold before it started coughing it back up. Miller, the kid with the prayers, took one in the neck. He didn't scream, just looked shocked, like someone had told him a lie too big to believe. I grabbed him, tried to pull him back, but his body was already limp. I let go. I had to. The water around me was already warming with death. They told us to move, but there was nowhere to go. The beach was a meat grinder. Some guys tried to hide behind tank traps. Others just lay still, hoping to be mistaken for dead. The sand offered no cover, only a false sense of not being watched. But we were watched by machine guns nested in those concrete bunkers, cold, unforgiving eyes that never blinked. I ran. I didn't think, just moved. My boots sank in the wet, heavy sand, my rifle useless in my hands. I fell more than once. Once, I landed beside a man torn nearly in half, still breathing through the red mist in his mouth. He grabbed my sleeve and tried to speak, but his voice was already lost to the tide. I left him. That was the first time I truly hated myself. I reached a small mound, not real cover, but enough to stop dying for a second. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would explode. Around me, the world was ending, at least the part of it we had brought from home. There was a boy screaming for his mother. There was another who was trying to push his intestines back into his belly. The ocean behind us still roared, not with waves, but with the sounds of boats unloading more boys to feed the sand. None of us were soldiers. Not really. We were farmers, bakers, mechanics, students. And now we were corpses in waiting. And that's when I saw him. Captain Harlow. He was still standing, barking orders like the bullets couldn't touch him. He was the only one who looked like he believed we might live through this. He yelled for us to push forward, crawl if we had to. "Every inch counts," he shouted. "Every goddamn inch." But the beach didn't want to give inches. It wanted bodies. And by the end of that first hour, it had plenty. The ocean kept moving, but its color didn't. It stayed red, and we hadn't even touched the bunkers yet. They say time slows down when you're close to dying. But that's a lie. Everything sped up. The beach was pure madness. Smoke, screams, bullets, broken bodies. It all blurred together. Every sound was louder than the last. Every second felt like it could be your last. You didn't think. You didn't breathe. You just tried not to die before the next breath. We were pinned, face down in wet sand, maybe 20 feet from the water. Behind us, the waves still carried in more boats. In front of us, the bunkers kept pouring out hell. It wasn't even war at that point. It was slaughter. A firing squad with thousands of volunteers. Captain Harlow kept pushing forward, even though half his men were already down. He shouted like his voice could deflect bullets, waving us to move like we had a choice. I didn't want to die in that spot, so I crawled, belly dragging through cold sand soaked in blood, boots heavy with water, face raw from grit. A bullet snapped past my ear. Another tore into the sand where my hand had just been. I stopped crawling. I waited, then moved again. Beside me, a boy named Daniels. He was only 17. Crawled too. He had freckles and a crooked smile. We'd shared a cigarette the night before. Now he was crying. I don't mean sobbing, I mean crying like a kid. High-pitched, panicked. I told him to stay low, keep moving. He said he didn't want to die. I lied and said, "You won't." 2 seconds later, he did. A mortar landed behind us. The blast threw sand, metal, and parts of men into the air like confetti. I couldn't hear anything for a while. Just ringing. My mouth tasted like dirt and blood. When I looked over, Daniels was gone. Not just dead, gone. Pieces of him were all over, but there wasn't enough left to even recognize. That's when I understood. The ocean hadn't turned to ash because of bombs. It turned to ash because we burned in it. I kept crawling. Somehow, my body moved, even though my brain screamed to stop. All around, men were dying in every possible way. Some were shot clean through. Others screamed with missing limbs. A few just collapsed and never moved again. Nobody cried out for victory. Nobody looked brave. The war posters back home were full of smiling heroes. But real heroes looked nothing like that. Real heroes bled out in the sand, clutching their dog tags, whispering the names of people they'd never see again. Eventually, I reached a half-buried metal obstacle. I ducked behind it. The steel was still hot from the morning sun, but it felt like safety. For a second, just a second, I didn't feel like I was dying. That second was enough. 2 others joined me. One was a radio operator named Samuels. He was bleeding from the leg but still clutched his radio like it was sacred. The other was a big guy, Morales, from New Jersey. He didn't talk much, but right then, he grabbed my arm and said, "If we make it out, I'm never touching the ocean again." I didn't answer. I was too scared to promise something that felt like a lie. Captain Harlow was ahead of us now, just 30 feet from a rocky incline that led to the German bunkers. He was still yelling, but less now. Maybe even he realized how hopeless it was. Our squad had maybe 6 left. Maybe. The rest? Part of the beach now. Part of the ash. I looked back at the water. More boats were coming. New boys, fresh uniforms, clean helmets, wide eyes. Most of them would die within 5 minutes. I wanted to scream, to warn them, tell them to turn back, to go home. But the war didn't work that way. Nobody turned back. We went forward, or we died. Samuels finally got a signal out, called in support, said we were stuck, said the beach was chewing us alive. He didn't even flinch when a bullet tore past his shoulder. He just kept talking into that radio like it was the last voice God might hear. Up the beach, someone threw a smoke grenade. White clouds poured across the sand, hiding us for a moment. That was our chance. Harlow waved us forward again. I looked at Samuels. He nodded. Morales muttered something under his breath. A prayer, maybe, then stood and ran. I followed. For the first few steps, I thought maybe we had a chance. But the smoke didn't fool the machine guns for long, and by the time we reached the incline, Morales was already screaming. When Morales went down, he didn't just fall. He twisted. let out this awful grunt, and then silence. No scream, just silence. I wanted to stop, to grab him, but I couldn't. If I stopped, I'd be next. So I ran harder, heart in my throat, smoke stinging my eyes, bullets tearing the air like God's own wrath. Captain Harlow was ahead, waving us toward a broken patch of cliff. Not much cover, but enough to hide us from those bunkers spitting death. I dove behind a chunk of concrete, breathing like I'd just outrun the devil. Samuels slid beside me a second later, blood still dripping from his leg. But he didn't seem to notice. He held onto that radio like it was his lifeline. It probably was, but something about his face had changed. He looked spooked. Not by the bullets. Something else. You hear that? He asked, eyes darting toward the cliff face behind us. I didn't hear anything at first, just the chaos we'd gotten used to. Then, I did. A rumble. Deep, faint, but not distant. Not artillery. It was coming from inside the cliff. What the hell is that? I asked. Samuels shook his head. Sounds like machinery. I looked back toward Harlow, who was pinned under fire. Then at the cliff. A section of it looked strange. Too smooth. Too clean. And right at the base, half covered in debris and sand, was a metal hatch. Not German bunkers. Something else. It didn't make sense. We were told the Germans had concrete fortifications, machine nests, but this wasn't that. This hatch, it looked modern, polished, hidden and humming. Samuels stared at it. You think this is part of the mission? No, I said. Nobody said anything about this. He leaned in closer. It's got an Allied marking, but old, wrong color scheme. That's not standard. Then it clicked. Not what it was, but what it wasn't. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't in our briefing, and we'd been briefed to death. Every inch of that beach had been scouted, mapped, analyzed. This hatch wasn't on the map. Then the hatch clicked. We both jumped back, rifles raised. The thing began to open, slowly, with a hiss, like it had been sealed for years, maybe decades. Cold air spilled out, colder than anything I'd felt all day. It smelled sterile, like a hospital wrapped in gunpowder. Inside, darkness, and then movement, a hand. It reached out, gloved, pale, trembling. Then another. A man pulled himself out. His uniform wasn't German, wasn't Allied either. It was black, sleek, unfamiliar. He wore a visor, and something on his chest blinked blue like a heartbeat. Samuels shouted, "Identify yourself!" The man looked at us, dazed. Then he said, in perfect English, "You're early." I stared at him, stunned. "What?" "You weren't supposed to breach this point until July," he said. They moved the timeline. Samuels lowered his rifle just a bit. "Who the hell are you?" The man didn't answer. He pressed something on his chest, and a faint glow traced across his suit. Then his visor flickered, showing something. Maps, numbers, dates. I swear to God. I saw the year 2089 flash across his display. That's when the ground shook again. Not from mortars. From beneath us. The man looked toward the beach. "They followed me," he whispered. "Who?" I demanded. "Germans?" "No," he said, eyes dark. "Worse." We didn't have time to argue. The sand near the water erupted, not from bombs, but from underneath. Something big moved below. Black shapes burst through like oil slicks come alive. I don't know how to describe them. They weren't men. They weren't machines. They were both, and they were fast. The man turned to us. "If you want to live, come with me. Now." I looked back at the beach. Our men were still dying out there, completely unaware of what was coming. We weren't just fighting the Nazis anymore. We'd opened a door to something else. Something buried. Something forgotten. And now, it wasn't forgotten anymore. I didn't move at first. None of us did. Our minds were stuck between two nightmares. The one we came in with, and the one now unfolding beneath our boots. Gunfire still rattled the beach behind us. But that noise, It faded. Or maybe we just stopped hearing it, because something worse had arrived. Those creatures, black-skinned things with spines like blades and movements too fast for the eye, began to tear through the surf. The first one latched onto a soldier with limbs like barbed wire, spinning him into the air and slamming him down like a rag doll. Another leapt across a tank trap, twisted mid-air, and landed on 2 men at once. Bones cracked. Screams were cut short. Samuels was frozen, eyes wide. I shoved him toward the hatch. "Move!" The man in black stepped aside as we jumped in. The hatch sealed behind us with a hiss that made my skin crawl. The gunfire outside dimmed. The screaming didn't. We were inside a tunnel. Metal walls lit by faint blue lines that pulsed with a rhythm, like a heartbeat. The air smelled like cold iron and something older, something dead. "What the hell are those things?" I asked, breath heavy, hands shaking as I gripped my rifle tighter. The man didn't look back. "They're called wraith spawn. Bioengineered hunters, designed for infiltration. Perfect killers." I almost laughed. "By who?" "Not your time," he said. "Not even your war." Samuel stepped forward. "What is this place?" "An access point, built under Operation Albion. Buried in 1918, sealed in 23. This tunnel connects to a vault 3 miles inland. That's where we make our stand." I stopped walking. "You're saying this place was already here before the invasion?" He nodded. "Long before. The Allies didn't build it. They just inherited it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me still wanted to believe this was shock. That maybe I was dreaming on that beach with a bullet in my brain. But deep down, I knew better. The cold air, the hum of machines, the creatures, it was all too real. Samuels limped beside me. "You said we came early. What does that mean?" The man finally turned, visor glinting. D-Day was never just about the Germans. It was a cover, a necessary chaos. The real mission was beneath the sand. They thought they had time, but something woke up ahead of schedule. He paused, then added, "And now, you're part of it." I didn't like that. I didn't want to be part of any of this. I wanted to go back to being scared on the beach. At least there, the enemy bled like us. We moved fast. The tunnel split twice. Each time, the man keyed in a code and sealed the path behind us. I caught a glimpse through one of the doors. Another soldier, or what was left of one. His body was twisted in half, eyes still open, mouth frozen in a scream. We reached a larger chamber, a kind of command post. Screens flickering, maps glowing, everything decades ahead of anything I'd ever seen. Symbols danced across monitors. One of them looked oddly familiar. A swastika, twisted with another mark I didn't recognize. A fusion of evil. A collaboration across something worse than borders. They were working together? I asked. "Some of them," the man replied. "Your side, too," Samuels blinked. "What?" He nodded. This was never about just one war. Nations don't matter here. They thought they could control what they found. Use it, weaponize it. But it's not controllable. Not anymore. I felt sick. All those boys dying on the beach? For this? The man reached into a locker and pulled out a long, thin weapon. It glowed faintly. "We're sealing the vault. Once that happens, this passage is gone. If we don't, the wraith spawn spread." I stepped forward. "Wait, you said they followed you. So what, you brought them?" "I escaped them," he said coldly. "They were never supposed to find this place." The lights flickered. The walls began to vibrate. Then the sound came. Distant metal shrieking. Not from outside, from deeper inside the tunnel. Something had found us. The man's visor scanned the wall. Too late. Samuels raised his rifle. "How many?" The man didn't answer. He just whispered, "Run!"